Good evening, Byram Hills. It is August 11th, 2020, and welcome to our Board of Education meeting. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. At 7:02 this evening, the board went into executive session to discuss two contract matters, one involving our bargaining units and one involving use of facilities. And we also discussed a legal matter involving classified students. And at this time, I ask whether there are any comments from the public on matters not on the agenda.
Give me a moment to check.
Of course.
Ira, while he's doing that, remember amending the agenda to
I got it on my pad.
You also have 7.1?
Yes.
Okay.
No, there are no comments.
Thank you. I just want to remind the community that to the extent you wish to participate in the board meetings by asking questions on various discussions we're having, please do so by logging in so we can hear from you and we can hear your name and participate that way rather than texting your questions, which is not the way that we prefer to have it done. Okay, so we thank you for that. Next, let's move to the adoption of the agenda. We are looking at an amended agenda where we've added item 7.1, which is the acceptance of the Byram Hills Education Foundation grant, My View Board for the classroom. And with that, may I have a motion, please, to adopt tonight's revised agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second, please? Second. Good. All in favor, please?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, we now move to item 6.1, which is the return to school plan. We've discussed this at several board meetings. It's been the subject of a lot of work by your Board of Education, and we're going to turn it over now to our superintendent.
Okay, thank you so much, Ira, and everyone. Tonight, our return to school plan has many slides. First, we will review our district recommendation to the Board of Education last time, and the board accepted this return to school plan, and we have moved on this plan since, with all K-6 students returning, 7 to 12 students hybrid, all language communications and special class students are returning, and Wednesday early release for K-5 teacher preparation time for virtual learning. Recall the last few times I've talked to you about a Coleman Hill schedule, where if you look at kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, you will see that in order to accommodate social distancing, we have developed Group A and Group B within each teacher's class. So many times a teacher will be spread across two different classrooms with Group A in one and Group B in another. And with our CAD drawings, we have placed those spaces 6 feet apart from each other for students. A teacher, if you look at the Coleman Hill, and I explained this in depth in the principal's coffees and also at the last board meeting, so I won't spend as much time on it. But essentially, if you have a social studies and an ELA block, an elementary teacher will spend some time with Group A instructing, some time with Group B instructing during that time period. And during the other time period, those children will have assignments and projects to be working on that were designated by the teacher and will be facilitated either by another teacher or a teacher aide. We really minimize the movement throughout the day. We are really keeping kids into these cohorts of anywhere from 8 to 12 students approximately in a cohort. They are not mixing with other students at all, with the exception of our buses, if students ride the bus. So recess, lunch, everything is going to happen within your cohort. Teachers, specials, and others are going to be coming into that child's class. So children at the elementary level are not going to be moving from classroom to classroom either. And this was based on the best guidance that we could get about transmission and keeping kids in cohorts to keep them safe. Also, in the event, and I hope it doesn't happen, but that we have a positive case of a staff member or a student, we will easily be able to identify who that staff member or student has had contact with, so that we can provide appropriate documentation to the Department of Health for their contact tracing and for their testing. Wampus is a very similar schedule to Coleman Hill. Same thing is going to happen with Group A and Group B. At the elementary school, this is what I explained about A is with a teacher, B is with an aide or another teacher, and then they switch during that block. The benefit to this is that children in the elementary level do not have the learning dispositions to be doing this work by themselves at home. It is best either taught by their teacher or monitored by a school professional during the course of a day than it is for that child to potentially be home alone trying to do this learning. So knowing that a classroom teacher is going to be with each child multiple times throughout the day, which is significantly better. Coleman Hill and Wampus, remember on Wednesdays, we're going to have an early release. We need this for teacher collaboration and preparation time. Teachers need time to work with the other teachers and the aides who are going to be facilitating the children when they're not with them. So that is key for that time. And in truth, our teachers are backed up to their instructional minutes, even according to contract. There is no additional time in the day for that. This was a necessity. For grade 6, we try to limit movement as much as possible by doing a block schedule, very similar to what we did at the elementary level, where students are going to be coming on odd days and even days. If you take a look at 7th grade would operate the same way, but this is most important. Group A, which is students in A through K, will be coming on Monday and Tuesday and alternate Wednesdays. Group B, which will come on Thursday and Friday, will also have alternate Wednesdays. Every child in this category is going to be learning with their teacher according to their school schedule every day during the time their periods are in session, whether they're in school or out of school. By the time we get to middle school and high school, we have people who are tenured in their specific area. So for example, when you get to 9th grade, you may have a child who's taking algebra, a child who's taking, or geometry, a child who's taking biology and an English class. And at the high school level, they are not, and secondary level, they're not generalists. So a certified teacher in that area needs to be teaching you. And that was the reason for doing this kind of grouping. So when we got to the high school schedule, you will see that the numbers correspond with what the periods used to be. We have done a block schedule here too to reduce the number of times that children are moving. We have transition times in between. We have butcher block paper for the desks to cover desks between periods and systems so that kids are not sitting and putting their hands on a desk where somebody else's hands were. And we are really trying to separate the students out throughout the day. The reason we went hybrid for a middle school and a high school setting, recall, is that those students usually have the learning dispositions to be working remotely if they needed to. If we brought all of those students into school, we would have the space, but essentially you would have crowded study hall, not crowded, 6 feet apart, but study halls for children during the times that they were not going to these classes. And we just didn't think that that was the best option to increase rate of transmission, potential rate of transmission in school when these children can learn in a remote setting and keep the social distancing. So for the high school, it will look very similar to the middle school with the A groups and the B groups, and Wednesday being a rotating day. We've gotten very good feedback from the community so far. After the last board meeting, I held multiple principals' coffees. We've gotten very good feedback about the scheduling. Parents are very appreciative of the fact that if their child or their household corresponds to one of the New York State Education Department reasons for remote instruction, that the district is providing that to them. I really feel that parents, with all of these scenarios that we presented, have the opportunity to make decisions for what is best for their families. And that was critical for us. Westchester, George Latimer and the County Executive Order County Executive Office came out with the Commissioner of Health, Dr. Amler, to answer a bunch of questions. And I think a lot of these questions are good edification for the board and for members of the community, because everyone's questions, now that they know what the schedules are, is what's going to happen in the event of a live case? What's going to happen in the event a child has a fever? Like, is a fever going to shut the whole school down? So the Westchester Health Department came out with this Q&A, which is important for us to share. First of all, about contact tracing. I've reiterated this over and over. We are not, as a school district, going to be conducting the contact tracing, but we have systems in place and people in place to collect the information needed for contact tracing. So to give you an example, if we have a case of a 7th grader who is COVID positive, the assistant principal knows every class that 7th grader's been in. We know every the bus that child would have been on. We know every special education provider and every other teacher and child who may have been exposed to that 7th grader. And then the next step is we give that information to the Department of Health. They start their calling to tell people they've had direct exposure and that they're going to have testing done. We would then follow up with emails or phone calls to people in the district as well to say that we know that the Department of Health is reaching out to them, just as a second backup in the event that they don't get reached by the Department of Health, that we can connect them together. So we're not responsible for the contact tracing, but we are wholly responsible for figuring out who has been in contact with that COVID positive person, be it a staff member or a child. They will never release the names of the infected persons, and people will be required to quarantine for 14 days from the time that they have had contact with a COVID positive case. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's okay because I'll go get a test, and if my test is negative, I don't have to quarantine. And the Department of Health clarifies it here. A negative test doesn't release you, first of all, because you may have taken a test at a time when you were not symptomatic. So it could be a false negative. And that you still have time to contract these symptoms. So even if you have a test and it's negative, you still have to quarantine. It doesn't release you from that. So you're talking about, at any given point, groups of people who had exposure to a person who's COVID positive, who are now quarantining at home for 14 days and may never ever develop symptoms and may have a negative COVID test. And this is actually just the price we pay for COVID. I mean, it's what we have to do to keep everyone safe, is to follow these guidelines. They talk about isolating people. When should you get tested? This is very interesting. They're recommending testing be done 5 days after exposure. So if somebody is sick and goes home and gets tested for COVID, by the time that result comes back, they're recommending from the date of exposure to that person, making that testing about 5 days later. Don't feel like we as a district or you as individuals need to figure that out. The Department of Health and their contact tracers will ask all the appropriate questions to figure out when the best time is to test. Where do we get tested? We could have a site. They could offer a site here, or they could offer a site at one of the Department of Health testing sites. That will be dependent upon the number of people involved and their staffing and what they need. If we do have it here, it will be at the district office front parking lot, which is in the front of the district office. And if it's somewhere else, we will be providing that information to those who need to be tested, and the Department of Health will provide that information first. There are a bunch of sites here under the testing tab that people can call for assistance if you need to locate a testing site. And there are no charges for these tests. When can a person who is tested positive return to school? Is it the same process for students, faculty, and staff? So they say if an individual who tested positive has symptoms, it's been at least 10 days since they first started experiencing symptoms, and they don't have a fever for 3 days without medication. And if they have any symptoms still, they have improved. Now, this is very interesting because this to me sounds like somebody could come back to school and still have some symptoms, but they have passed the COVID measured amount of time to quarantine. And provided their symptoms improve and they don't have a fever, the Department of Health says that they are no longer endangering others to be around them at that point in the COVID process. I am interested to see if that changes over time. Can we assume that students with antibodies are safe? We've all learned, if you're reading up on this, you've learned that that does not deem you to be safe. And are rapid tests reliable? They have a high rate of false negatives, but you do get the results in less than an hour. So they talk about they have a coronavirus basic fact sheet that people should go to, but it's not recommended necessarily to do the quick tests. This is something that I've had a couple of questions about recently. Students coming back from vacation to places that there are travel advisories. Do they have to quarantine? The answer is yes. They cannot come to school at all. There's another question later that says, well, what if the parent goes to one of those areas and comes home? And that the guidance is the child can come to school, but the parent, provided the parent does not have symptoms when the parent is isolating at home. And what qualifies as exposure? This is interesting. So we have a close contact. That means a person who has had direct contact with a COVID-19 positive person. And we have a proximate contact. That means you were in the same environment as these people, but you were greater than 6 feet. You had positive tests, of the person displaying the positive test. The Department of Health in that case is going to determine if these proximate contacts also need to be under quarantine. So what if I happen to be in a mixed class and I was in the gym with this student and we went outside for gym and I was not in the same locker room and we were outside and I wasn't even remotely within 6 feet of this person and we were masked at all time, the Department of Health may decide that that person should or should not be under quarantine. And then there's a trick about isolation periods if you're infected rather than being quarantined. So if I have some symptoms and then I get a test and 2 days later I get the results back, I have a certain number of days since my symptoms started. I can actually go back after that certain number of days. A person who had contact with me actually has to go a little bit longer because they have to take 14 days from the point that they met with me, which actually puts them at a later period than it does me. I find this timeline of infection from the Department of Health pretty interesting. If you look at the numbers, those are the number of days. Just to show you, and everybody's talking about are you transmitting to one person and how long does it take? So here we have the first person who I think gets coughed on by another person, if you're following that piece. So they have an incubation period, but typically they are going to be potentially affected for 14 days. So sometime within those 14 days, they could be, they're in their incubation period. Now, let's say toward the end of the 14 days, they start to become symptomatic. You see that person seems to have a headache and maybe a shoulder pain. They have a mild illness. They could potentially be out once they develop symptoms at the end of that incubation period. They could be out another 14 days or so. So this one person, from the moment they got infected through the incubation period to when they started getting symptoms and then through to recovery, it is the month. It's a long time. And anyone who had an infected contact, they might have a 5-day incubation period from there, 10 days more to get signs and symptoms. So you could see how even for this one infected person, though, that if they get infected, they pass the incubation period, they start to get symptoms, they could be potentially out of school or work for the duration of a month. In the event there's a large exposure, what is the plan if the Department of Health gets overwhelmed? They've assured us that they have collaborated with the New York State Department of Health. They have a joint system for tracking. They're going to allow increased capacity for contact tracing. And what happens for people outside of Westchester County? So for our community, this is important. You may go to a physician in Connecticut, or, I live in Rockland County, I may go to a physician in New Jersey. What happens to my symptoms what happens to my test results if they're positive? Will people in New York know? Will this place know? And they will. They're sharing that information. So whether you're in another state or you're in the state of New York getting tested, those lab reports will go back to Westchester and will be provided to the Westchester County Department of Health. These are great questions for parents. If you have a child who tests positive and the child has a sibling, should they keep the sibling home? Yes. You may say, but the kids, they don't interact all that often and child number 2 doesn't really have symptoms. Doesn't matter. They're supposed to stay home. Department of Health will tell us they have to stay home. If someone is home on quarantine and then develops symptoms, Explain how that impacts attendance or school or work and what it may mean for the siblings. So if a student or staff member tests positive, their household members will be considered direct contacts, close contacts, and they will have to quarantine. If someone has to quarantine and has a family member in isolation, is it 10 or 14 days for the quarantine, or could it be 4 more days? So determining quarantine periods is going to depend on each situation, and we are going to rely on the Department of Health. Although there are metrics for this, we should not start dictating to people right now how long they should be staying home, how long they should be quarantining. That is not the role of the school district. It's the role of the Department of Health when they tell us. I already covered the parent who goes away. This is an interesting one. Does the student have to quarantine if the parent had contact and is quarantining, but does not have any symptoms? Okay, so if I'm a student, the question is, do I need to quarantine if my mother had contact with somebody at work who's COVID positive? Well, my mother does not have symptoms. And what they're saying is my mother should separate herself from me in the household, a separate bedroom, separate bathroom, don't share anything, limit the time. And if my mother is actually really quarantining away from me, I can leave home as the child. This is very interesting because I think when we started in March, we were assuming that a COVID positive parent, not a COVID positive parent, but a parent who had contact with somebody who was positive might mean something as a trickle down effect for our school, not if that parent is not symptomatic. And time frame for contact tracing, I just know that they aim to have contact with individuals and start testing within 24 hours. And then we should be having the test lab reports within 24 hours. I have seen this have a complete 24-hour turnaround time from the time you call the Department of Health until the time the testing is done and the results come in. So I don't know what that's going to look like when times are thicker and we have more cases in different schools in the county, but that was pretty considerable. So these are the metrics that I talked to you about last time that the governor shared with us about why it is that we're in phase 4 and below 5% transmission rates mean that we can open safely. And if those rates change by the end of August, we will be at a point that we may have to close. But for now, our numbers are still good for us to continue with opening. And the last one is previously, if there was a case, we had to close the building for 24 hours. Is that still the case? They recommend waiting at least 24 hours before cleaning and disinfecting the area. It is not true that you have to wait 24 hours to run other programs in that building. These metrics were interesting. Scenario 1. So I had close contact with somebody on the 1st of the month who had COVID-19. I have to quarantine. My last day of quarantine would be the 15th. This is from the Department of Health and the CDC. This next one, I had close contact with someone who has COVID. I live with the person, but I can avoid other contact. Okay. The last day of quarantine would again be the 15th. So this is somebody you live with who has COVID, but they are isolated from you. Scenario 3, under quarantine, and you had additional close contact with someone else who has COVID. So on the 1st, I started quarantining, but on the 5th, I was exposed to somebody with COVID. Now I have to move my quarantine 2 weeks away. So you see how every time you come into contact with someone, it's going to take that much additional time. So this person started quarantining. The person is sick, has COVID. So I live in the house with them. They start quarantining on the 30th. So I have to stop the home isolation on the 9th, but then I have to quarantine myself because I could have developed symptoms all the way up until the 23rd in each quarantine. So that was the point where I told you it could take the better part of a month if you have exposure to somebody who has had COVID. So what are the district steps that we're going to take? So we have 6 steps to this process. Once we have a reported case of COVID that is a child or a staff member, then we contact the Department of Health. We give them all of the individuals that are involved, their date of birth, their phone numbers, their addresses. We collect all of those contacts for the Department of Health. The Department of Health makes calls, asks questions, gives us some guidance about who we should be isolating. They will give the guidance to the people to quarantine or to isolate if they need to. We will follow up with everybody in the district to make sure everyone's gotten the Department of Health messages. We'll look at where the testing sites are, whether they're here or somewhere else in the district. We'll help to facilitate that. Although we're not doing the testing, we're just helping. We will get the test results, we hope, within 24 hours and district notification. So when will you be notified? This is important. If we are closing down because of a positive case and we are closing down a cohort and the Department of Health does not deem anyone else to be at risk because of that cohort, we will contact that cohort. If it is a cohort where there are shared teachers and it's, there's the potential for significantly more exposure, the district may close down an entire grade level. Or in the case of a high school or a middle school where there's lots of movement, we may have to close down for 2 weeks an entire section. So it is going to depend upon the person who is positive and who that person comes into contact with. Those will be the people that we are identifying. I just have to stress to this community, because I've been through this process, you will be notified if you had any danger of being a direct contact. So know that if you were not asked questions by the Department of Health, it is because you did not have this direct exposure. On our website, we have contact tracing and testing, a new section that I put up there today that I vetted through Dr. Thomas Murray, who works with us from Yale Children's Hospital, and through Melissa Price and Lori Dyer. Richard Stumacher took a look at it. Frank Contessessa took a look at it. So this is what our district plan is going to be for contact tracing and testing. So I encourage anyone, since the last time we've put all of our plans up on the website, easy accordion folders to open sections that pertain to you or that interest you. I really encourage you to go there and look through that plan. Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES also put together this COVID safety response protocol, and we're going to be using this. So this outlines everything that I just said to you. What happens if we have a COVID positive student or staff? You'll see that we go straight through with the white boxes, with probable closings and following guidelines and getting testing done. But if we have a contact of a contact, they're saying no action is required. We're going to follow this. This has been vetted. And we will use this as a support to our 6-step process. School closures, I went over before, and I went over the last time too, that we're going to notify a cohort, a grade level, a building, or the broader community, respectively, when we feel that it affects you. And, for something like if we're closing down all of Crittenden, I will be sending something to the community because that's showing us that we should be notifying everyone if a building is closing. But certainly if a cohort is shutting down, everyone in the community is not going to receive notification, only those who might be affected. Don't forget that the fast facts are also right on the website. That talks about all the video training that's going to be going out August 14th, the health self-check attestations that faculty and staff are going to be doing, parents checking their own children for symptoms, receiving an occasional attestation sheet. We will be equipped with walk-through temperature screening machines. And if they don't arrive in time, we already have in possession the hand scanners to use. We're going to conduct those screenings every day. Masks will be worn by employees and students at all times unless students are directed following the protocol the district will be setting up of when it is safe to take off a mask. And know also that I added to the website some new CDC guidance. I want to thank some parents in our community who shared this with me, that some of these ventilated masks are actually now the CDC is saying they are allowing spores to be coming out of those ventilation holes and they're not recommended. I did put that on the website. I will stress that at the principals' coffees and the faculty meetings too. Our transportation department sent out their surveys. We are now looking at all of the routing to try to see if we need to switch some stops to create more distancing on our buses. I think, Gina, am I correct that we have approximately half of the students who are still going to be taking the buses?
A little over half.
A little over half. For social distancing, remember we had those designs done of each individual classroom through a computer design to make sure that these spaces are 6 feet apart. We're going to have classes in larger areas like gyms, cafeterias. And I just have to say that Lily Lee in Coman Hill, I went by and looked at the gym yesterday, and she has a classroom in there. And I don't even understand how she's ever going to want to go back to her regular classroom, because it is an awesome spot for these kids. Thank you, Lily Lee, and all of the teachers that have been coming over the summer to move their classrooms, to move their materials to these new spaces so that they can make great environments for these kids coming back. Remember, we're not having visitors. We are practicing hygiene. We have a lot of scheduled frequent hand washing for students. I suspect parents are going to have to invest in a lot of hand lotion when these kids get home. It seems to be a lot of hand washing during the course of the day. Cleaning, everything that we are using is going to be on our website under the cleaning tab. I encourage you to go there to look at any of the products that you have questions about. Remember that Lysol wipes are not to be used by children. Lysol wipes have an actual application where they have to be put on, they have to cure, and they have to be cleaned off. So this is not something that should be around all the time. Tim is going to speak at length about our code of conduct addendum, as he and Gina are spearheading the policy committee, and they've added all of those things that really are pertinent during this time, that we could be in and out of remote, and we are in a hybrid setting, et cetera. So just some addendums to that code of conduct to get us through the year. Again, the recommendation that was given to the board. I also want to point out that our return to school plan was submitted to the New York State Ed and the Department of Health on July 31st to meet that deadline. As I said, that is right on our website with very easy accordion links to open up. I really want to thank the members of the stakeholder group who still are helping so much. This Thursday, we have another meeting to go over what I'm doing in the board meeting tonight. Next week, I will be covering the same information in the principals' coffees and in my faculty meetings. But if you look at the number of professionals who have been on here, who have been helping us with this plan, I can't tell you how indebted I am. And every time I turn around, I'm sending somebody an email and they're spending time to review our documents and to edit. People are learning Google Docs that haven't done it before, and just spending countless hours for the sake of all children in this community. I thank you. Also, the Byram Hills Education Foundation, they really are collaborating with us on district technology. As you'll learn about our grant tonight that Tim is going to discuss, they have also spent a significant amount of time walking through our grounds with us for outdoor spaces. We have picked out, I think there have to be close to 35 or 40 outdoor spaces that we plan to utilize. Right now, we have shade covering for those spaces that we've determined, and the BHEF is going to support the district with. And I'm going to look at outdoor seating, cushions, et cetera, to try to accommodate those spaces too. That's my job tomorrow. Strategic Planning Committee, thank you so much to all of the administrators who put together that really impressive, I mean, it still sits by my desk, but a really impressive timeline of when all of this work was going to be happening. And special thanks to all of these task forces and committees, subcommittees, Strategic Planning Committee, Development, Review, Discussion of District Return to School Documents. You will see the task forces, the ELA and Math Advisory, Special Education Service Provider Specials. These were all of the groups that have been meeting for weeks and weeks to try to get these plans together. It's curriculum planning and it's organizations planning. Members of every single department, chair people, and members of those departments who have been working on what does our education look like during this time. Again, we have our principals' coffees that are coming up on July 30th, and we have our faculty meetings, August 20th, and we have our faculty meetings on August 19th. I have my stakeholder group this week and again on the 25th, and the Board of Education and I have been continuing to meet every single week to make sure that everyone is apprised of every step of this process. So I want to thank all of our really good thinkers in this community, all of our dedicated staff and administrators who have spent a lot of their time to try to get this underway for us for the fall.
Well, Jen, that was some presentation. I think it was a great presentation. It was thorough. It was organized. And I hope the community members will have an opportunity to see this on TV, to see it on tape, to look at the document, will be as impressed as we are with the thinking that went behind this. I think Byram Hills has been very well served by the administration and by the just phalanx of members that contributed to these programs. It really touched almost every department in the school district, every grade. The participation is simply fantastic, and it's you need that to get a plan that is as thorough and comprehensive as this. So we spoke about it at our last meeting. We won't dwell on it other than to say we're very proud of what the district's put out here, and we think it really represents the best of Byram Hills. So to Jen, Tim, Kelly, Gina, and everybody else in the academy, thank you for a remarkable document that I think will serve us very well in an era of enormous uncertainty, because we really still are in a very uncertain time with very uncertain outcomes. So I'll open the floor and any comments or questions from the board on this. I neglected to mention to the community that Scott Levy cannot be with us tonight due to attending a personal matter. Michael?
I write in one comment. The amount of information that you and your team have been able to synthesize down, the questions for the parents, I think it's a lot of material. And I think you guys, just echoing what Ira said, have put something together that should give us faith and hope in a back to school that works. And just the thoroughness of it has been really impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Any other comments, questions from the board at this point? Any comments in the community, Tim, on this?
Yes, I do have one question coming from Theo Allen. Oops, getting a cough at the same time. Asking, are masks required at all times in classrooms?
So masks are going to be required at all times unless a teacher or a staff member designates that it's safe to take a mask break. And we are going to be developing the protocol so that everyone has the exact protocol for when it is safe, because we don't want somebody thinking it's safe and having it not actually be safe. So we will set the parameters around that. And on the opening days when we have training for teachers and staff, everyone will have a full understanding of what constitutes safety in taking masks off.
And that's the only question I have at this time.
And I do encourage those questions. We had so many questions because we had, I don't know, close to 500 people on our elementary principals coffee. Any questions that we could not answer in the chat, we went and answered and sent out to everyone yesterday. And we encourage you to send questions either through your building administrators or to me, Tim, or Gina. We're happy to answer those questions if it means that you can feel more comfortable or you could set parameters for yourself as a family. We all know that there is a great chance that someone is going to be COVID positive. And if you know what we're doing to prevent it and what we're going to do in the event of it, I think you can make the best decisions as families.
Okay.
Jen, is it possible to post those questions somewhere on the district website so people
Sure.
who weren't on the call or?
Well, I sent it to everyone, Mia. I sent it to all elementary parents.
Okay.
So you didn't have to be on the call. So I guess not really. Why would I bother, right? I mean, it went to everyone who has an elementary child. And they were all elementary.
Okay. Anything else from the board before we close this portion of the meeting? I think the board, Jen, if one of our goals here is to be as transparent as possible with the community, I think we've succeeded and you've succeeded. So I think that's a large part of how this works, is giving the community all the information we can give them to help them make reasonable choices for them and their families. So again, thank you very, very much. And with that, we'll close item 6. We'll move to item 7, new business. Acceptance of the Byram Hills Education Foundation grant. Before we discuss it, let's get it on the table. May I have a motion, please, to accept the grant?
So move.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Jen.
All right. I would like to I want to stop sharing my screen because I think Tim is going to present something, correct? All right. So I want to thank the BHEF. The BHEF is has been so aligned with the district with these goals that we've had for years, since 1993 or 4. But right now, you know, we're in a much different time than we were in March. In March, when we were first exiting schools and we were figuring out what we needed to do for instruction, we have a lot of teachers who are going to be teaching, particularly at the secondary level, to a group of students who may be in the room with them, a group of students who are in the hybrid model who are home, and a group of students who have the remote learning and are going to be home the entire time. So Andrew Taylor was really instrumental in finding this this piece of technology called ViewSonic. Tim's going to talk a little bit about it. The BHEF was great about running through and modeling that with us and what it looks like, and us testing that with our building technology consultants to see if it was something that would really work for this district. And I think if I were a secondary teacher, particularly right now, with teaching students in those different environments, it is just so much better than live streaming from the back of a room. I've watched live streaming from somebody at the end of a tunnel, and it's not an ideal way for students to be learning and growing, right? So Tim, did you want to take over?
Unmute and share. So let me, yeah, Jen, thank you for that introduction of this new technology. I'll go right to that first, and I want to thank Andrew and his tech team for working on this. So I think I showed this graphic before, which is one way of using the technology when we're teaching students in our classroom as well as home learners. It could be used in just a remote situation as well. I will show you a tutorial video Andrew made, just a moment of it so you can get a sense of how it works. What it does here is it connects very simply to your computer, whether it's a desktop or a Chromebook or a laptop. And you have access to sharing anything that you show on the screen. You can write on the screen, and it has other capabilities of doing such things as creating individual boards for students to work on that you can then comment on. And then you can flip back to, say, a document camera, which all of our teachers have as well. It really makes for a dynamic, interactive classroom environment. Let me show this video that Andrew put together. I'll show just a moment of it so you can get a sense of how it works. Whoops, let me click out of this for a second. Ira,
Hiram, you might want to mute your mic while you're snacking up there. You enjoy it, but we can hear.
Nah, it's time for dinner. Oh, hold on. Sorry, guys. Go ahead.
Great. Let me show this.
Hi, we wanted to introduce a new device that we think is going to make your life a lot easier, and we're getting for all the teachers at Byram Hill this year. It's called the ViewSonic Active Board. So we know that it's really difficult to think about how am I going to present to students that are in front of me, students that are down the hall, and students that might be across town at home. We think that this is going to really help improve the way that you're able to interact with students in a real-time environment and present in a way that's natural to the way that you normally would present in a classroom. The ViewSonic is an interactive panel that can be moved up and down and allows you to easily write on the screen and control everything, just like you would at a Promethean board, but you're able to sit right here and use the camera on your desktop and the microphone in your computer to be able to present naturally through a Google Meet or a Zoom. There's 3 different applications I'd like to show you and how you use those in the classroom. So let me introduce the technology a little bit for you. This is the laptop that every teacher is going to be receiving when you return to school. It's a Dell laptop, and I have it connected to the ViewSonic board over to the right. On the left, I have it connected to the IPEVO 4K document camera. So with this, I'm able to do things that are physical right here underneath the document camera. I can use this as an extended screen. So what I mean by that is I have my laptop And then I have another screen right here. So now I have two screens that I can use. On this screen, I have a Google Meet up. By having the two screens, I can now see all the students that I'm working with. And you can see I have Johanna right there, and she's one of the students, and she could be a remote student. I could have as many students as I want in the Google Meet. I'm sharing this screen over here. So everyone in the Google Meet is able to see this screen on their desktop or on their laptop or Chromebook. Or if you're in another room, they'll be able to see this on the Promethean board or display this in the other room that you.
So let me stop there. That's he shows other applications. This is pull up documents, be able to write on those documents. It can be a website, it can be other lessons that they have designed, and then easily switch between that screen, their document camera, or any other documents they want to show, while also being able to see the students in your classroom, which I think is another really important piece of this as well.
Tim, I saw this in action, and what I really liked was watching Andrew pull up a document on the ViewSonic and then write on it.
Yes.
On the document itself. And then while I'm on my computer, I'm seeing a screen of the document and I'm seeing him add up numbers and do calculations on it. So, right. You know, and then being able to save that so that I have that for later. It was so much better when Andrew got up at that point and went over and showed us what it would look like if a camera had been in the back of the room. It was such an incredible difference to what I was seeing as a student using ViewSonic.
Right. And then the document camera, a lot of teachers are using that as well. You could switch to that, and you can also then use the ViewSonic screen to write on top of what's projecting from the document camera, which is another really cool piece. So it makes it this really amazing interactive type of board that you can project to the students. So it can really simulate you being with the students writing on a whiteboard or your Promethean board. So this will be a great, yeah.
Sorry, will this be available to teachers at all grade levels?
Yes, we're going to get it for all grade levels. We've purchased one for every teacher. It will live in the district. If we are in person, we will have teachers take it home if we have to shut down and go fully remote, because you can use it remote as well. We hope to receive them within 2 weeks, and we will begin setting up an immediate training session. Andrew has already introduced it with some teachers and some chairpersons who are very excited about it. And
What's the learning curve? What's the learning curve like? Is it easy for them to learn?
Some aspects are really simple. So just plugging it in and using it right away with sharing your screen is very simple. There's several other components to it that can be more complex, like having kids being able to assign, say, a document to 4 or 5 different groups, and where you can watch what they're writing on live. That takes a little more time to figure out, but it's a fairly quick learning curve.
Okay.
And the fact that everything teachers are currently using on their Promethean boards through Active Inspire, that technology can be utilized using ViewSonic. So it's not like everybody has to, when we changed like smart boards to Promethean boards, and you have to adapt all your technology.
Right.
You don't have to do that here.
Right. Yeah, whatever we have through the Promethean board and your Google Drive and any other web-based resources you're using can be presented and written on right on this document, which is really terrific. So it's immediate application at our secondary level for those teachers. You'll see on the slide I have coming up all the different technology the elementary teachers are learning. So there'll be a lot of learning at the elementary level, and I'll explain that in a moment. So if there's no other questions on this, again, thanks to the foundation, thanks for Andrew, thanks for Brian Melso for making that video very quickly with Andrew. So appreciate that. So another thing to talk about.
Tim, are we finished with the grant issue?
Yes, I believe we are.
Okay. Do we have a motion then to accept the grant from the BHEF? I'd like to make it a motion to accept with gratitude. All in favor, please? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, thank you, and thanks again to the foundation. Thank you, Tim, for your presentation.
Sure. Thanks.
The floor is back to you.
And please let Andrew know, also kind of jumping on this, I don't know how he would know how to use it so quickly and demo it. So I give him a lot of credit for this type of stuff. I mean, I've seen a bunch of different presentations on this emerging technology, and this is terrific stuff. So it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew's really quick at this. He was meeting with Lisa Pellegrino today, who wanted a preview of it to jump on it. She's very excited, and so are all the math teachers. And Andrew was saying, oh, it's really easy to learn. I just learned it by playing around with it for about an hour. And Lisa stopped and said, Andrew, that's you. So you can learn things really fast. But yeah, Andrew did spend some time on it. So I do thank him and the other technology teachers. They're really excited about it. So thanks to the foundation. Andrew did a presentation for the foundation, and they demoed it for them as well. So thanks for for our next topic, I want to talk about the option to be fully remote for those families and students who fall into the medically vulnerable or high-risk group as outlined by the state education guidelines. I put out a survey last week, and to date, these are the numbers that we have for students who will not be coming in person because they fall into those requirements or meet the requirements put out by the state. We have a total of 114 students right now, 37 at Hill, 36 at Wampus, 31 at the middle school, and 10 at the high school. So based on that, we're beginning to design, or we're continuing to design the remote option and the instruction and what that will look like for the students who are staying at home, and we will be providing instruction. We will be assigning 2 classroom teachers at Coleman Hill and 2 classroom teachers at Wampus based on these numbers. So one teacher will work with the kindergarten students, and then a teacher will work with 1st and 2nd grade students in the remote environment. And then 3rd and 4th grade students will be assigned a teacher, and then 5th grade will be assigned to a teacher. So when placement is sent out next week, families, they are being placed regularly, and that's important for families to understand, because we do want to assume we will be coming back and you will be assigned to a homeroom teacher. However, if you're choosing this option, you will then go to working with a remote teacher at home. Should that family decide their situation has changed and this child is able to come back to school, we will then transition them back to their originally placed homeroom teacher. So we've hired 4 building substitutes for this, and then we will assign teachers. We're working on that assignment right now based on this model.
So Tim, if somebody has to go on quarantine, they will transition to this remote.
That's different. Yeah, so for quarantine, they're going to still be the responsibility of the classroom teacher to be working with those students who are home. This is just for those students who fall into this category, who will be in this for long term. With K-5 students, it will be the academic subjects focusing on right now. With the specials, it's a little more complicated. Our specials teachers, the art, music, and PE and library are fully utilized in the building, and we need them in the building. So we'll most likely be sourcing this out for asynchronous instruction, but really focusing with that teacher on the academic content areas. For students who are in 6 through 12, the classroom teacher that they're assigned to will be responsible for working with those students during the regularly scheduled time. And that's where this board will really, the ViewSonic will certainly help out in that situation. We feel that works well, certainly 7 through 12, where students are in the AB already. So they will be working with students at home, and those students will just be working with their classroom teachers as normal. So it's a complicated system. We have been really working hard on the logistics of it. And I think this will be a good plan to help those families who need to stay at home. That's that piece we've been working on. To give a couple of K-5 curricular updates, as I indicated, we have purchased a diagnostic tool called iReady. We will be administering a diagnostic assessment to every student in kindergarten through 8th grade to be able to evaluate the learning loss from the spring in ELA and mathematics. And based on that diagnostic assessment, which is an adaptive assessment, so it's a really good learning tool for us, an assessment tool, teachers will be able to then assign personalized lessons to the students based on the areas that they need to learn from the loss in the spring, should there be any gaps in their learning.
This is really interesting to me. How does this work? This is something I'm totally unfamiliar with.
Sure. Oh, yeah. It's an adaptive tool that's been around for a while. This one in particular is what we thought was the best. We looked at 3 different.
You tell me it's been around since 1965, then I'll withdraw my question.
Not that long. I can't do it. But it is an assessment. You take it in math, and if you get questions correct, it gives you harder questions. So it's a typical sort of, artificial intelligence adaptive program. And then it will evaluate and put out a learning path for those students. So it'll show you where the gaps are. Then this particular company, and this is why we chose this one, then has instructional materials that you can assign to that student. So that student could be working on that instruction when they're not with their classroom teacher, but they're in the other group, or if they're learning at home. This is work that students could be doing asynchronously, and then the teacher can monitor their progress in those areas. So while they're learning the current content, they then are working independently or with the classroom aide helping them, and then the classroom teacher evaluating that later on the content that they need to make up from the previous year. So it's a pretty sophisticated program, and it was that piece that we liked. It was that personalized instruction tool that we felt was the thing that sold us on this particular product. So that's one tool we're learning. Teachers are training on that now. During August, we have a training system, a training schedule set up. Also this month, teachers are looking at the technology tools. They're training this week in mathematics on our investigations. It does offer fairly rich resources. There are some things it doesn't offer that we're putting together for the asynchronous and remote learning for students as well. But we will be using the assessment tools. We will be using some of the other technology tools in the investigations program that we already use. Then we've also been evaluating a literacy program because we've been in the process of a literacy study, and what we've been looking at piloting last spring isn't available with digital tools. But there is a program that we feel is the best one called Wonders. Working on that contract right now with that company, which gives a full scope and sequence of ready to implement digital literacy materials. We are looking at some hard copy books as well to get in the hands of kids, but this is a really great system that covers all the different areas in a good, strong literacy program, including having read alouds, guided reading. It has a whole phonics and grammars and spelling curriculum as well. And the teachers, we had a committee and teachers looked at this and really liked this tool. And it has the content. So the problem in the spring was that teachers had to take their current curriculum and put it into an electronic format. They don't have to with this. It will exist already. And it does fairly strongly align with our approach. Teachers will make adaptations in synchronous sessions with their kids, but it does have the content there, so teachers don't have to spend that time transferring all their materials electronically. So it also, what I like about it, it has a social emotional piece to it. It is geared toward essential questions. So every unit has a really powerful essential question, and all the literature is aligned to that essential question, and then integrates the social emotional component as well. So I think the K-5 task force have been working really hard in all those subcommittees that Jen showed on that piece. 612 task force has been busy as well. We've been meeting regularly. They turn key information that we talk about to their subcommittees. And I have a few examples. I won't go through all the examples here. I do want to show you one piece of it. This is from the social studies department, where they streamline the information that we've been talking about in terms of our instructional framework and our model lesson plans, and then working with the subcommittee to write model lessons aligned to the district's instructional focus. So 2 teachers on the committee, one was Joanna Lewick, and one was Sheila St. Ange in 6th grade. So if I can show you this example quickly of what Sheila put together as a model lesson. What then Layden has done then is meet with the department and go through these examples. So this would be an example of what it would look like in a remote situation, but it can also translate to in-person. Is a unit, looking at the sample unit, this would be then a lesson in how that scheduled time during remote learning would look with students. So the goals would be made very clear of what they're looking at in this particular lesson early in the year. What are some of the traditions and values and beliefs of a shared culture? So you would start with a session with all the students so you could talk about the activity and frame the lesson, and then give them some time on their own where kids go off and complete a task. This is something called Nearpod that the teacher created. So during that independent time, kids have to work through this electronic session. There's audio clips, it guides them through a lesson. Then at one point, students actually have to create something. So they have to add to this document, I can't go on because I didn't finish the assignment. So kids have to do what's on the screen, and the teacher can be monitoring what students are doing during that asynchronous time. So they're working independently, but they're still live with the teacher. The kid's working through this piece. So that would be one of the tasks. And then they come back to their Google Meet with the teacher in the class to check in again. And then they do another sort of independent or group activity, and I won't go through this piece of it. And then they come back again at the end of the class to wrap it up and have a discussion. Now, remember, in the middle school, they have longer blocks of time of about 80 minutes, 85 minutes. So this sort of frames the way the teacher will do both live and independent and group work, all within that same period, having kids going in and out of the Google Meet, but also monitoring that independent work in real time and looking at what kids are doing on shared documents. So that was an example following our instructional priorities that we talked about at the task force meetings. So that was one example. I also want to show this that Melissa Stahl put together. Lisa created a version 2 for her teachers in her department, which is also modeling the same things we talked about at the task force meeting as we designed our instructional model. Melissa put together all this information in one place for her department, and again, they had a department meeting about it. So the first few pages are showing our instructional framework, which I've presented at public meetings before, where we're ensuring that teachers and students work on lessons that have that interaction with students, the teacher and the students together, and the students interacting with content. That's framing all of the lessons that we're writing. And then she put together some examples of lessons that she created with her subcommittee that start with building community. How do we get kids to really connect? That was some strong feedback we got from the community on how we get kids to really feel connected to each other and to their classroom. So the World Languages Department are going to create the early lessons around that community building idea and around themes of world languages. And they created some model lessons. In this document, you can actually go in and see the examples of the lessons or watch some videos on some examples that they created. They put together a pre-assessment and some examples of how to administer this pre-assessment and what the pre-assessment documents look like on these pages as examples for teachers to then take this and replicate it. There's some other pre-assessment examples and then some instructional examples. So I won't go through all of that detail, but it shows you the volume of work that our department chairs and the teachers on these committees had created over the past 4 or 5 weeks. Whoops, let me go back to my document. Keep opening the wrong thing. And again, these were the task force members. Jen thanked them as well in her slides, but I do have to point out these teachers and then the committee, the subcommittee members who worked on this curriculum material, so that we have a strong instructional plan that focuses on research-based instruction with sample model lessons that the chairs had turnkeyed back to their departments, and they have their teachers who worked with them who can now be experts in this area so that they can help their colleagues in creating lessons that are aligned to this instructional model.
I think that's huge, Tim. I just, I think a lot of the feedback we got last time was that there was not a lot of consistency. Like some teachers were really into the technology and doing wonderful things, and other teachers were less comfortable with the technology, and and the parents were frustrated that the kids weren't getting the same level of e-learning. And I think having the teachers work together with sort of an expert is fantastic.
Yeah, that was our design at the beginning of the summer. How are we going to really make this work to be owned by teachers and then turnkey that? So we created the task forces and then subcommittees from the task force work. So the task forces met every week. I facilitated that with the administration and the teachers. And then they all had subcommittees that went and did that work in between our weekly meetings. So there was a lot of meeting time and a lot of work was created. And it was just for that purpose, Mia, was to generate the common knowledge of what our priorities are district-wide, to be very clear on that.
Yeah, I think I guess I'm piggybacking what Mia said a little bit. It's the consistency. I think that's so important. And I think this really helps in that. And again, a lot of thought obviously went into this, Tim. So great. Thank you.
And we get it. I mean, this is not how any of these teachers were trained to teach.
Right. That's exactly right.
This is new to all of them. We completely get that. So, there's going to be different comfort levels.
Yeah.
Yes. And
so I think that support is great.
I talked to one parent yesterday who was really, really terrific and understanding. And he had some questions about something, and he said, I understand this. We're going to have successes in the fall, and we're going to be unsuccessful at some things. I get that. This is all very new even now. And we agreed that when we are unsuccessful, call us up and we're going to try to get better at those unsuccessful things. So we did really take to heart what our lessons learned were from the spring. Teachers knew that right away too. And that's why I think our faculty was really committed to working hard over the summer to understand all this and putting it together in a coherent way. Well,
we're certainly calling on our faculty to adapt very quickly and to learn very quickly and to transition quickly. And from what you're telling us, the administration, they've generally been very successful at it. And the kids are the beneficiaries. So that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, that is. And I really thank our department chairs and directors who have really led this work as well, and putting together these documents and turning that in the summer with our faculty through the department meetings and preparing for the superintendent's conference days that are coming up in just a couple of weeks.
Well, believe it or not, everybody, it's already August 11th.
I know.
Exactly.
Even though we've all been sort of enjoying Groundhog Day since March, it is August 11th.
Right.
And slowly but surely, the school doors are going to open again.
Yeah, which is part of the reason why everyone's doing the around the clock work. I showed you that list that was pages and pages deep of people who are on all of these committees who have done this work.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that there have been 10 hours that occurred in one day from the beginning of March until now that Tim Kaltenecker was not working. It was Saturday and it was a 10-hour stint, and that was it. And there was like an apology on his end for not being available during 10 hours. So Tim, thank you so much. A lot of it is there are committees that meet, but there's a lot of other work that has to happen, individual conversations and hearing people's viewpoints and, trying to make sure this is right for everyone. This isn't just a prescription. This is something that comes from the teachers and from their work, and then it builds into something better. And Tim has the disposition and the patience and the vision to do that. And that's why people develop these things, and Tim doesn't dictate them, which gives fidelity to them when we do the work. And, also gives recognition of teachers as professionals as they are. So thanks, Tim.
Our teachers want to be successful. So, we work hard because we want to support them and give them what they need to be ready.
And as parents, we're incredibly appreciative. I think a lot of the anxiety going into the start of school is coming. The parents have a lot of anxiety, but from my experience, I think the kids are so excited to come back to school. They really are, they're longing for this. So I think your hard work is really greatly appreciated.
Yeah, we can't wait to see them either. And I have to say that just from knowing colleagues in other school districts and things that they're facing, this comes from the leadership of the BHTA and the BHAA, that all of this work is happening. And I know that this isn't happening in other places. And I know that other districts are really struggling with what teachers are willing to do or not willing to do in the classroom, or administrators. And those are not issues that come to the table in Byram Hills, because our teachers and our administrators are just consummate professionals who care about the kids. And that comes at a personal cost to people. So I appreciate that.
I think that's right. And I think we would be remiss if anyone ever thought that the board did not appreciate the efforts of the BHAA, the BHTA, because, the old expression, we're all in this together. Well, we're all in this together. And they
And
certainly are
POTA,
a big
we
part of
shouldn't
it.
leave them out either, right? We're all in there,
Yeah, no, that's
all
right.
on committees, right?
So it's just fabulous. It's just, our transition to this situation has been great. It's just been great. So any other, Tim, anything further?
One more thing, Gina and I
Yes.
have been working on the addendum to the code of conduct, which will be
Right.
brought forward to the policy committee when the new policy committee is put together by the board, when the committee assignments are finished. But we wanted to get this draft in place and ready to go. Remember, our code of conduct is board policy. So
Yes.
this is just in draft form, but we wanted to get it ready for the start of the year. There's a couple components to it. I'll just go through those. One is having guidelines for video conferencing. We don't have that in our current. We do have behavior guidelines that are in it, but we wanted specific guidelines for video conferencing since that will be happening across the district. So there were some items on there. This was put together from some of the models that were put together by terrific teachers in the spring. And it was also a site-based team meeting with parent input this summer and all the site-based team committee members this summer. So I thank everyone for coming together and helping us with the guidelines to help kids be successful. And there's some items here everywhere from being on time, being appropriately dressed, some protocols around it. We had put together, Brian created some backgrounds that kids can use. So if they're in a location that might not be appropriate, like if their space is set up in the bedroom, kids can put on a background in the background. If they're using Zoom, for example, we have that district approved backgrounds and dressing appropriately and respectful behavior. So it's all outlined here.
That's right.
Which is a document that will then live in our code of conduct, and we will adhere to the code of conduct. I think that's
No pajama bottoms underneath the shirt, right?
exactly right. Then we have a section on the temperature checks and screening, so that self-checks have to be performed daily, and we're developing the protocols here. Those will be finished by the time this goes to the board for approval. And then the mask and social distancing, we have gotten like the question tonight from the parent about will the masks be required, and this will be in our code of conduct, so we will enforce the mask wearing.
Tim, how will this be this information be distributed to the community? This is important stuff.
Sure. So it will be first when it's approved and adopted by the board. Gina and I meet with the principals and administration, and the administration keys this to the faculty. And then the principals will communicate this via their plans and communications to the community members. And that's usually our communication with
Are parents and students expected to both sign?
They'll sign the code of conduct. There is we have the technology agreement that they sign, but not the code of conduct. That's a board policy, so we enforce the code of conduct.
So they don't have to agree, Mia, because it's a policy.
Okay.
Yeah, is this, are we gonna move this addendum on for a first read at the next meeting? Is that the intention?
That's our
Yeah.
intention, I believe, yes.
All right, well, I think we should do that. Okay. Is there any problem with members of the board moving this on for a first reading at the next meeting? Because I think we'd want to have this in place sooner than later, but let's follow our rules about amending policies. Okay, good. Let's do it then.
Okay, great. And then there's attendance. We will require attendance for remote sessions. Since we are requiring attendance, if you're learning remotely and need to be checking in, you will be marked absent if you do not check into the video conference session. And then there's information about quarantining. That people have to follow the New York State Department of Health guidelines on the quarantine restrictions. So thank you.
I want the board to please, between now and the next meeting, do take a look at what Tim just published. We should treat it as if it's another policy and look at it in case there are any tweaks you wish to offer to it. We'll put it on for a first read and then usher it through from there.
I'll make sure that's in the
And Jason would help us if we want to have a policy committee meeting just to look that through with them. So if you could set that up, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Happy to discuss it and look it over.
At their standard rate of pay for such services.
and that's all I have, I believe.
Well, that was great. Thank you very much, Tim. Any other questions for Tim on his presentation? Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I think that brings us to the superintendent's report. Anything more from you, Madam Superintendent?
Yes, I do have a few things to report.
Okay, let's go.
First of all, Tim, wow, I can't thank you enough. Always. Like this work is really manageable, doable, and enjoyable because you are here doing that.
Absolutely.
Tim and I met in 2003. Tim was my mentor. And at that point, we used to talk about, well, how are you going to it was pre-technology, really, right?
Yeah,
So
we
how are
can
you going to organize your folder?
Right.
Remember when sticky notes came out, right?
Yeah,
And Tim and I would get nervous when we would have to present in meetings. And now it's like, we don't have time for being nervous anymore. It's too much stuff.
Constant state of nervousness.
Yeah, but the work that you do is just incredible, Tim. And I could not be here doing the work that I do every day, and everyone else couldn't either if you weren't the person that you are. You are dedicated to these children and this place like a marriage. And
that's
that
right.
can go
That's right.
unnoticed by anyone in the school district.
Okay, thank you. And again, I couldn't do it without you and Gina and Kelly and the board and the administrators and the teachers.
We are enormously fortunate, Tim. You know how we feel about you, and what you've produced for the board in the last couple months has simply been remarkable work. So thank you very much, and we're very fortunate.
Do it for the kids always. We want to
That's right.
make it
That's
the
right.
best experience for them. That's why
That's
I
right.
work so hard.
That's right.
Committed my life to education.
Well, we're very fortunate you committed it here.
Yeah, we sure are.
I'm actually sweating and blushing. I don't know if you can tell.
I don't know. I spent some time in the district office the last few days, and I didn't think Tim was working all that hard, frankly, but
Yeah,
apparently he really was.
he doesn't come off of a call or a meet.
Exactly. He was on the same call for 4. He just never takes a breath. It's just amazing. Thank you, Tim, so much. Really. Go ahead, Jen. Back to you.
All right. The first thing that I want to talk about for superintendent's report is I've received 2 correspondence from parents who are inquiring about ACT, SAT testing. I know that while so many of the colleges are not requiring this testing this year, that there are many people in the community who think that, their children could be advantaged if they're able to take these tests, like perhaps some students in other areas in upstate. There are a number of reasons why Byram Hills has not been a testing center before. And we have had many of our neighbors who have been testing centers: Fox Lane, Scarsdale, Yorktown, Mamaroneck, much larger schools. Some of the reason behind that has been staffing on our part, the ability to get a testing coordinator, to have all of that staffing, and to also support the many different types of learners and accommodations, special education accommodations that need to be met for these tests. So you could have up to 10 different types of accommodations that may need to occur for students. And if that student is supposed to have anything more than extended time, if they're supposed to have directions read or any one of those things, that requires a human being to each of those children. So for staffing reasons, we really, and the fact that we are a very busy school district on the weekends, many of our staff are involved as coaches or in other extracurricular activities. We have not entertained that as a district. Also, there was a situation of, do we even have the space, let alone the staffing to do that? Well, now many things have changed, and I know that parents are eager to have their children be able to take these tests because they feel that they're afforded advantages by taking them, even if they're not required. I know a number of reasons right now why we looked into that, Mr. Walsh and I and Christina Wilson, to try to see, is it feasible and possible for us to do that test? The sheer magnitude of us trying to find proctors for those tests on the weekend, us having to socially distance these kids and kids with certain accommodations, and the number of people and spaces that would entail, made this a little bit of an administrative conundrum for us. I'm not sure that we could actually pull it off. If we tried to fill out an application right now, it would be a good 8 to 10 weeks until we would receive approval to have that. That would maybe make us eligible for a December date. I think it's a December date, I'm pretty sure. December 5th date, if we get approval by a certain amount of time. Even then, I'm not sure that we could staff it for the amount of staffing it would take and the amount of rooms it would take, because we don't have the super large facilities that some of our neighboring counterparts have. That said, we have talked about it. That part doesn't make sense to us either. The application process, the having to have a testing coordinator, going through the payments with the College Board to do this. This is difficult for a school to do right now, especially at this time of COVID, when we have no idea when we're shutting down, if we're shutting down, contact tracing, the need to keep all of those kids socially distanced. So that is the rationale for why the district has not done it before and why the rationale is that we have not done it now. I know that there are many districts, many places that are just canceling these tests. So we have people going to Pennsylvania, going to all sorts of places to try to take these exams, and these exams are getting shut down left and right. With our inability really to staff that right now, I don't see that as being an option for Byram Hills. I think that our community knows me well. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to look at every option to see if we could do this. So to that end, I promise the district that I'll continue this thought process, these conversations, see if there's somebody we can partner with. Is there anything else we can do? But I do not think it's feasible for Byram Hills to offer it here and now with what we have. So I will be expecting to get back to the board if I find things out in the next week or so, if anything can help to help our kids.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Anything further? Jen, is that it?
Nope, I think, oh yeah, just two different things. First of all, the Board of Regents, the public should know, appointed Betty Rosa as the interim commissioner, and Vice Chancellor Brown as the chancellor. So Betty Rosa is going to step out of that position now and take the interim commissioner position, just in case you needed to keep up with the revolving door of state of the three people who are working there. And the last thing I wanted to thank our Byram Hills PTSA and Petri Varma. Particularly, they sent out a letter that is going to all of our faculty and staff, just that they have purchased for all of them these face masks that have a Byram Hills on it, which I think is so sweet of them to do, and just faculty and staff for all of the hard work that they do on the behalf of children. And regarding Petri as the president, we have numerous calls during the week, on the weekends. The PTSA is always a partner to the district and just doing so many things for our kids and our staff. We feel greatly appreciated by you and your support. So I want to thank you for the gift to our faculty and staff.
You know, you just hear over the last few months how many different parts of this community have contributed.
Yeah.
The administration, the BHAA, the BHTA, the faculty, the foundation, parents, consultants. It's just been an enormous sharing of knowledge and education and devotion to get this done. It's really remarkable. So we thank all of you. We thank all of you for your work in support of the children, because that's why we do this. No more, no less. Okay, any questions for Jen on her report? Hearing none, I just remind the community that the board did have three executive session items, which I recited at the beginning of the meeting. And with that said, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Okay, all in favor, please? Aye. I wish you all safety, good health, and we'll see you soon. Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.